Hare Krishna. So we are on the third day of our 18 days of Gita Jayanti. And I want to share my realizations on the third chapter. The third chapter of the Gita is titled Karma Yoga. The third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is, for me, the most important chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, certainly the most easily applicable chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, of all the other chapters, in my personal opinion. The third chapter of Bhagavad Gita deals with what I like to call where the rubber meets the road, where our spiritual aspirations hit head-on with material reality. Our spiritual aspirations are confronted without mercy with the reality of paying the mortgage, feeding our children, paying the bills, paying health insurance, for those of you who live in America. For those of us who live in America. Those who may be watching from elsewhere, it's a concept that you can't wrap your head around. What? Pay for health insurance? This is the third chapter. The third chapter talks about work. It's called Karma Yoga. But not Karma Kanda. That's different. Karma Kanda section of the Vedas is about how to do good work. How to work in accordance with the principles of dharma so that you can get good consequences. Karma Yoga is about working in such a manner that you can obtain liberation from samsara. Karma Kanda, the Karma Kanda sections of the Vedas do not deal with that. Karma Kanda sections of the Vedas deal with how to work in such a manner so that you get good karmic results. You are, however, still ensnared in material life. Karma Yoga is about how engaging in the same activities, but our consciousness is transformed in such a way that the work itself is actually liberating rather than binding. The third chapter of Bhagavad Gita is for those of us, I was going to say who live in the real world, for those of us spiritualists who do not live in the temple full-time, who are not privileged and lucky to be able to live in the temple, in an ashram full-time, to live in the holy dham full-time, where the other aspects, the other concepts, the other teachings of Bhagavad Gita can be practiced and engaged in without any distractions from the material world, material nature, material reality. I won't say material reality. I'll say the demands of modern civilization is a more accurate way of saying it. Because when we are under the shelter of a mandir, under the shelter of an ashram, under the shelter, the full-time shelter of these places, the full-time shelter of the holy dham, then the demands of human civilization, of society, generally are stopped at the door. They don't have as great an influence because we're under the shelter of the ashram, we're under the shelter of the mandir. And that's a good thing. That is a privilege. That is indeed something to which we should aspire. That is the vanaprastha stage of life, right? After we've paid all our bills and we've sent our children on their way, then we take shelter of the ashram, we take shelter of the tirthas, we take shelter of the mandir full time, if that is possible, and focus deeply on the teachings of Bhagavad Gita that can be focused on in that time and space. But the Karma Yoga, this third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I think is the most important chapter because there's hardly anywhere in the world, anytime during our life, when we are not beset by the demands of modern civilization. How many of us are actually going to retire? Take Vanaprastha at the age of 50. I'm 48 years old. I will not be taking Vanaprastha at the age of 50. Good Lord knows I would love to, but it's not going to happen. So the reality of modern civilization is such that it is encroaching upon, always pressuring, always in the face of our spiritual development, always needs to be dealt with. 60, 70 years old, the demands of modern life, the modern civilization, taking care of dealing with bills, dealing with social issues, dealing with familial demands and obligations, all the way pretty much up until the last end of our days. This is the beauty and what I would say is the importance, the significance of the third chapter. Because the third chapter teaches how to live as a spiritualist in a modern world. How to pay the bills in the modern world as a spiritualist. This is the third chapter. The third chapter is so important that Krishna repeats it. That's the fifth chapter. The third chapter is Karma Yoga. The fifth chapter is Karma Sannyasa Yoga. It's the same content. Arjuna is confused. Third chapter, Krishna talks about Karma Yoga. He talks about Karma Yoga in such a way that Arjuna becomes confused. Well, what's the difference between working and meditating? There's a difference, but you seem to say, Krishna, they're the same. I was way back when, not way back when, actually maybe 10, 15 years ago. I remember this discussion because it became such a heated discussion back in my younger days when I was always trying to win arguments rather than win knowledge. That's another topic for another time. Sometimes we get into trying to win an argument rather than winning wisdom, winning understanding, winning relationships. We'll talk about that another time. So back in those days when I was always interested in winning philosophical arguments, I was talking with this one, I was giving a lecture at a yoga studio, and many people came and we were having this lecture, and then there was a Q&A session. I like to have first a bit of a lecture, and then at least leave at least half as much time as I gave for the lecture, that much time for the Q&A. So we got into this strong Q&A session, which was very good, very enlivening. And one person, I think she was one of the staff members or one of the staff members of the yoga studio. She may even have been the owner. She said, because it was something on this issue, how I had said that you can be a spiritualist, you can be spiritually realized, even if you're a cashier at the local grocery store. So this particular person, she took exception to that. She says, raise her hand, actually, no, I don't think you can. You can't be a spiritually realized soul and be a cashier at the grocery store. You have to be sitting in a cave in the Himalayas. Not sitting in a cave, but you have to have the external environment that indicates you're spiritually realized. You have to be peaceful, you have to be sitting in a waterfall or a retreat. That was the visuals she was providing. So we got into this back and forth about this issue. And it wasn't resolved. And I just realized this is not the place to try to win an argument, public forum. But she was adamant, so I just left it as it was and tried to do some jujitsu to get around it. But she was right, because that was the same question Arjuna had. Arjuna says, it makes no sense that you're telling me to be devoted to the Supreme but go to war. How the two are incongruous. How do they don't go together. That's the third chapter. And this is why I feel the third chapter is the most, if we can master the teachings and practice, apply the teachings of the third chapter, it's karma yoga. We're going back home, back to Godhead. But we have such a difficulty as spiritualists walking the path of dharma, bhakti yoga, Krishna consciousness, in a world, in a modern world that demands so much. That's the third chapter.